Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Twilight Zone review. Today it is Season 4, Episode 6, Death Ship, written by Richard Matheson and starring Jack Klugman as Captain Paul Ross, Ross Martin as Lieutenant Ted Mason, and Frederick Beer as Lieutenant Mike Carter. And this episode is a perfectly acceptable average Twilight Zone episode in my opinion. There's nothing great or terrible about it. So I'll get right into the episode. We start with three men in a spaceship, and we learn they are explorers, and there are three main characters. And they pick up something on their radar, but they're not sure what it is, so they debate for a few seconds whether they should land or not, and ultimately they do, and they find a wrecked ship there that looks a lot like their ship. I wonder what that could mean. And it's also worth noting after they land that the captain and one of the men, Mason, just don't seem to be getting along very well. There is some friction between them, which will make more sense at the end of the episode. So they exit their ship to investigate, the other ship that they found. And Mason does note that they look very much alike. So they go into the ship, and this takes a while. It's a little padded, being an hour-long episode. And what they do find, though, is pretty interesting. They find some dead crew members, and when they turn them around to look at the faces, the crew members look exactly like them, meaning they are them. Mason examines his own body and finds an ID card identical to his. He says this proves that they look alike, but the captain is in denial. He says there's no way these are the same bodies because they're alive. They're right there. They can see themselves. So he says there must be another explanation to this. So the captain starts yelling at Mason as they're arguing. And to be fair, the captain is just a bit overly crabby here. I know he's in charge, but I'm just saying. So they're trying to get a signal on the radio, and they can't. And the captain just keeps coming up with all these different things to try and explain it. And he comes up with this interesting theory that they're in some kind of time warp. And it's like a warning that if they don't go back up into space, they'll never crash, meaning the events will never happen. So his solution is he says, we're going to stay right here. We're not going to go up. And once again, there's an argument about this, and the other guys say, you don't have anything to go back for. That's why you don't want to go back. The third man, Carter is his name, I believe. We haven't heard too much from him yet, but he says we don't have enough food. But the captain ultimately wins this argument by saying that nobody has a better solution. And whether you're with this guy or not, that's pretty reasonable. I would say he's right about that. So we go to the next part of the episode, and we get more out of our third man, Carter, who we have not met too much. He's really troubled by this whole experience, and all of a sudden he just winds up in another place, and he figures out that he's back home, and he looks for a woman who we find out is his wife. Her name is Mary, but when he goes to look for her, all he finds is her things. And he also finds a letter that said he had a funeral and that he's gone. So all of a sudden Carter is back on the ship, and he insists that this was real and that he must have been killed. But once again, the captain just absolutely does not believe it. So after they talk about this, they look around, and now Mason is missing. And we have this scene where Mason sees his daughter, and later on he finds his wife, and this scene's all right. It's just kind of there. I think it's supposed to evoke a lot of feeling for the character. I thought it was okay. So now we can understand at least what this man's motivation was for wanting to get back. He wants to get back to his wife and daughter. So everything is going well until his little meeting is interrupted by the captain, who is there, and he tells him to come back to the ship. This isn't real. I'll pull you back to reality. So Mason resists, and the captain literally pulls him back, meaning he grabs him and pulls him back. So now Mason really flips out. He's really upset. The captain hits him, so they fight a little bit, and the captain insists that they're alive, but he says that his initial theory was wrong. He has a new theory. He says there are aliens there, and somehow they are tricking them. They are using mind control on them to hallucinate all these different things. Now, the other two men aren't buying it, and at this point, I'm not really buying it either. And at this point, I think the twist becomes somewhat obvious, although to be fair, maybe not so much to a viewer from back then, but I think it's pretty obvious at this point. So the captain says there's only one way to prove I'm right. We're going to go back up and we don't crash. You'll know that my theory was right and all these things are illusions that we're seeing. So Carter says there's no way I'm going back up. He pulls out some kind of gun. I'm not sure what kind it is, but they talk him out of it as Mason says the captain's right. He backs him on this point. He says the only way to know for sure is to go back up. So they do go back up in a scene that seemingly takes forever. It is an hour episode after all, and everything seems okay at first. So the captain then theorizes, well, I was proven right, everything's okay, we didn't crash, so we're going to go back down and land to complete our mission. I didn't know about the logic here. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But so they all start arguing about it, and it looks like they're going to crash because they lose control of the ship. But in yet another twist, this whole ending part is very drawn out. They don't crash. The ship actually lands, but unfortunately, after a few seconds of looking around, the other ship is still there, the ship that the captain insisted was fake. So the captain says there must be an explanation, I'll figure it out, and Mason says it's time to accept it, we're already dead. He says the reason we're going over this over and over, we find out, is that the captain could not accept what was going on, so they are, I guess, in some kind of limbo until he lets it go and accepts that they are all gone. So it's fine. It's an okay twist, if a little bit predictable. The episode's really just kind of there. I don't really have anything great or terrible to say about it. It's a perfect example of an average Twilight Zone episode that has some interesting points here and there, but nothing too memorable or great. So I'm going to give Death Ship a 2.5 out of 5. You can check it out if you want. It's probably worth a one-time watch. So 2.5 out of 5 for Death Ship. And as always, thank you very much for watching.